We really need to talk about the sheer speed of modern life.
Hmm.
Because if you just look around, I mean, it seems like the entire world has agreed on this one unspoken rule.
Faster is always better.
Right, faster's better. We are completely obsessed with it. We want instant replies, same-day delivery. We want all these life hacks to get perfect results instantly.
Yeah, there's this overwhelming pressure.
Exactly. This pressure that says, if you are not moving at just this breakneck velocity, well, you're falling behind. If you aren't clearing your inbox the second a message arrives, you're failing. We've built this culture where speed equals mastery.
And that's the defining characteristic of our era, really. We have completely conflated velocity with competence.
Yes.
We look at the person sprinting through the airport or that colleague who sends emails late into the night and we think, wow, they're incredibly effective. We equate being frantic with being good.
And that is exactly the trap. Because for this exploration, we are going to dive into a completely counterintuitive idea that flips that whole narrative on its head.
It really does.
What if that obsession with speed is actually a sign of weakness? What if the person running around with their hair on fire isn't a master at all, but just a novice who has lost control?
That's a huge paradigm shift.
Right. And to understand this, we are going back to the era of the samurai. We are opening the fourth scroll of Miyamoto Musashi's masterpiece, The Book of Five Rings.
We're getting into the wind scroll, and I gotta say, the premise here is going to challenge a lot of the conventional wisdom we hear constantly in business and self-improvement circles.
If this episode helps you, please hit like and subscribe for the next one.
So Musashi argues that speed is often just panic in disguise. He suggests that true power, the kind that actually solves the problems and achieves lasting results, does not look like frantic movement. It looks like rhythm.
Rhythm over speed.
Yeah.
That is our core mantra for this discussion. We're going to strip away the style and the flash that totally distracts us.
The decorative stuff.
Yeah, the decorative stuff. And we are going to learn how to replace that frantic rushing with the unstoppable power of calm timing. This is all about strategy, discipline, and everyday mastery.
It's about learning to distinguish between the mere appearance of effectiveness and the actual reality of it.
Okay, so let's open the wind scroll. I want to start with the title itself, actually.
Yeah.
We have covered elements like earth, water, fire. Those are elements we can touch. They feel substantial. But wind, why name this specific chapter the wind scroll?
Well, this is where we have to look a little bit at the linguistics of his era. It's a very clever double entendre. In the Japanese language of that period, the character for wind also implied style or tradition.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so when Musashi calls this the wind scroll, he's doing two things simultaneously. He is evoking the nature of the wind, it's invisible, changing, pervasive, but he's also explicitly labeling this as his chapter on styles.
Styles, you mean like different fighting styles?
Precisely. This is the chapter where he actually stops talking about his own school and turns his gaze outward to critique all the other schools of swordsmanship that existed in Japan. He's essentially reviewing the competition.
So this is basically the diss track of the book.
In a highly sophisticated way, yes. But it isn't just trash talk for the sake of his ego. He is identifying a systemic failure in how other people approach mastery.
Okay.
He says that these other schools are seduced by style. They get totally obsessed with the surface level of things, the aesthetics, the equipment, the fancy-looking moves, rather than focusing on the core truth of the actual encounter.
What exactly did being seduced by style look like back then?
He breaks it down into very specific critiques. For example, there were schools that were completely obsessed with the length of the sword. They taught that a longer sword was the ultimate advantage simply because you could strike from further away.
I mean, that seems logical, right? Having a longer reach is a good thing.
It seems logical until you test it against reality. Musashi calls this a severe weakness. He says if you rely entirely on the length of your weapon, you become completely dependent on it.
Right.
What happens when you are caught in a narrow hallway? What happens in a crowded room? Your extra-long sword hits the ceiling. It catches on the walls. You are suddenly helpless because you focused on the tool rather than your own capability.
That is such a fascinating parallel to today. I feel like we see this long sword syndrome in the corporate world constantly.
All the time.
Companies that think, well, if we just buy the most expensive enterprise software, or if we just have the biggest budget, we will automatically win the market.
Absolutely. That is classic style chasing. It's this false belief that the equipment somehow confers the mastery upon you. Musashi also critiques schools that focused heavily on what he termed indoor techniques.
Indoor techniques. I kind of love that phrase. It sounds really derogatory.
It is incredibly derogatory in this context. He's talking about schools that teach all this fancy footwork, rapid-fire small movements, and intricate little hand gestures.
Stuff that looks great on camera.
Exactly. These things look beautiful in a pristine environment. When the floor is polished wood, the lighting is perfect, and your training partner is fully cooperating, you look invincible.
Right.
But Musashi asks the practical question. What happens when you are actually outdoors? What happens when you are standing in a muddy field? What happens when it's pouring rain and the ground is unstable?
Those intricate footwork patterns probably just get you killed in the mud. You'd slip immediately.
You'd slip and fall. He says those techniques are strictly decorative. They are designed to be sold to students who want to look impressive, not to serious practitioners who need to survive reality. He calls this favoring the flower over the fruit.
The flower being the style and the fruit being the actual result.
Spot on. And this brings us right to the biggest indoor technique of them all. The one we're really focusing on for this discussion. The complete obsession with speed.
Okay, I do have to push back on this just a little bit, because surely speed is a good thing. If I can move faster than you, I can achieve my goal before you can stop me.
It's a common assumption.
In business, we always talk about the first mover advantage. We talk about blitzscaling. Speed is basically the currency of winning right now.
Yeah.
How on earth can Musashi argue that speed is a style trap?
It's a completely valid challenge. And to be clear, Musashi is not arguing for being sluggish. He isn't saying you should move in slow motion. He is arguing against speed chasing.
Speed chasing.
Yes. He points out that many schools teach their students to strike as absolutely fast as possible, just moving their hands in a total blur. But he uses this devastating analogy. He says they are flapping their swords like a fan.
Flapping like a fan. That does not sound very effective.
Think about holding a folded paper fan. You can move your wrist incredibly fast. It becomes a blur of motion in the air. But does it actually have any penetrating power?
No, it just pushes air around.
Exactly. Musashi argues that when you obsess over pure speed, you lose your connection with the ground. You lose the structural weight of your body. You sacrifice all the underlying physics of a clean action just to appear fast to an observer. You might reach the target quickly, but the impact is shallow. It's just a speed touch, not a definitive action.
So he is drawing a hard line between mere velocity and actual effectiveness.
Yes, and he goes much deeper into the psychology of it. He says that true masters rarely look fast. Instead, they look deliberate, because speed is very often just panic in disguise.
Speed is panic in disguise. That is a concept that really stuck with me from the source text. Can we unpack the psychology of that a bit?
Let's do it. Think about a moment when you were truly rushing. Maybe you were late, or you suddenly realized you forgot to send a critical document and a major meeting is starting immediately. What is physically happening in your body in that exact moment?
Well, my heart rate spikes, my breathing gets super shallow, my vision almost feels like it narrows into a tunnel. I'm just frantically focused on the next immediate keystroke.
Exactly. You are in a state of high autonomic arousal. Your fight or flight response has completely taken over. In this state, your hands might be flying across the keyboard, you might be moving very fast, but your actual judgment is heavily impaired.
Because I'm just reacting to the fear.
You are reacting to fear. You aren't strategizing at all, you are flailing. Musashi says that when you see someone moving frantically, trying to do a dozen things at once, you aren't watching a master. You are watching someone who is terrified.
That is such a huge reframing of how we view work. We usually look at the frantic, stressed-out person and think, wow, what a dedicated hard worker.
Right.
But Musashi looks at them and thinks, wow, what a terrified amateur.
He uses the concept of rhythm to explain the proper alternative. He states that the master operates with rhythm, not mere speed. Speed is just a physical measurement of velocity. Rhythm is the actual intelligence of timing.
Rhythm versus speed. I want to make sure I understand this distinction perfectly, because if I have a really fast rhythm, isn't that essentially just speed?
Not quite. Let's use the analogy of music, which Musashi actually references quite often in the text. Imagine a professional drummer. A master drummer can play a drum roll that is incredibly rapid. but it never sounds rushed. It is perfectly spaced out. It is fully controlled. Every single beat lands exactly where it is supposed to land.
Right. They are completely locked in.
Now imagine a total beginner trying to play that exact same rapid tempo. They tense their shoulders. They start getting ahead of the beat. The spacing becomes uneven. They are rushing the music, even if they are technically hitting the drum fewer times than the master.
So rhythm implies having complete control over the empty space between the actions.
Precisely. It is all about the space between the notes. Musashi points out that in the way of dance or music, a truly accomplished performer can actually sing while they are dancing.
Because they aren't straining?
Right, because they are deeply relaxed, they have found the underlying rhythm, and they are simply riding it. A beginner tries to force the movements, they get physically busy, they fall out of sync, and they certainly don't have the breath control to sing.
This concept of getting busy really feels like the chord trap. It's that awful feeling of being totally overwhelmed by the tempo of your environment.
Musashi describes this as failing to notice the background timing. When you are rushing, you are essentially trapped inside your own head. You are projecting your own internal panic out onto the world, and you completely stop seeing what is actually happening around you.
What exactly does he mean by background timing?
Think of it as the broader context. Let's look at a standard business negotiation. If you are rushing because you desperately want to close the deal quickly or because you are terrified of an awkward silence, you are operating entirely on speed.
So I'm talking really fast, throwing out endless numbers.
Exactly. And because you are rushing, you completely miss the fact that the person sitting across the table just leaned back and crossed their arms. You miss the subtle hesitation in their voice.
Oh, wow.
You miss the clear signal that they were actually ready to agree moments ago, and you are literally talking right past the sale. Rhythm is the mechanism that allows you to perceive those vital signals.
That makes perfect sense. Rhythm creates this internal buffer of awareness. Speed just collapses that buffer entirely.
Exactly. If you are rushing, you are functionally blind. You are simply colliding randomly with reality. But rhythm allows you to harmonize with reality. You move with the flow of the situation, not against it.
Which brings us perfectly to what we call the rushing trap. Because even though we are sitting here calmly discussing this, and logically it makes total sense, the second we stop talking and look at our unread messages, that impulse to rush is going to flood right back. Why is it so incredibly seductive?
Because rushing creates a false feeling of productivity. This is the great illusion we face every day. When we rush, our brains give us a dopamine hit.
We feel important.
We feel highly important. We feel like we are bravely fighting the good fight. If you end your workday totally exhausted, sweating, having fired off dozens of frantic replies, your ego whispers to you that you had a highly successful day. You won.
But Musashi would look at that and ask, did you actually accomplish the objective?
Exactly. He would look at all that frantic activity and ask, did you meaningfully move the strategy forward, or did you just stir the air like a paper fan?
Ouch.
Rushing actively weakens your judgment. It creates what he calls a chaotic emotional tone, and this is especially crucial if you are in any kind of leadership role.
Because it spreads.
It spreads instantly. If a leader is visibly rushing and panicking, they transmit that exact panic to everyone in the room. It is highly contagious.
They set the emotional weather for the whole team. If the captain is freaking out, the crew is definitely freaking out.
There is a fantastic framework regarding decision-making under pressure that fits perfectly with Musashi's text here. It involves using a source test and a consequence test. This is how you actively break out of the rushing trap.
I found this incredibly practical when reviewing the material. Walk us through how these tests work.
Okay, imagine a scenario. You get a sudden demand, an urgent message from a client or a manager. Your immediate physiological reaction is that spike of adrenaline. The overwhelming urge to drop everything, rush, and fix it immediately.
Yep, the panic response.
Before you take a single physical action, you apply the source test. You simply ask yourself, who exactly is generating this pressure?
Like, is there an actual external crisis, or is it just my manager feeling anxious and wanting a quick answer so they can feel a little better?
Exactly. Very often, the pressure you feel is entirely coming from someone else's total lack of rhythm. They are operating in chaos, so they are unfairly demanding speed from you. The source test helps you isolate that truth.
And then the consequence test.
Then you ask, what actually happens if I slightly delay my response? What is the literal consequence if I wait a short while before acting?
I actually used this exact logic recently. I had a supposedly massive crisis message come in right at the end of my shift.
The classic timing trap.
Totally. My body immediately wanted to rush. I wanted to stay late, scramble, and solve it. But I paused and ran the consequence test. I asked, what literally happens if I address this when I return for my next shift?
And what was the answer?
The answer was absolutely nothing. The person who sent it wouldn't even be looking at my reply until then anyway.
That is a perfect execution of Musashi's calm timing. You accurately read the actual conditions. You realized the enemy, in this case the urgent deadline, was a complete
This is
illusion.
a phantom deadline.
If you had rushed, you would have spiked your stress, you likely would have made sloppy errors, and you would have burned valuable energy for absolutely zero strategic gain. By simply waiting, you maintained your own rhythm.
So let's clearly define this concept of calm timing, because I can already hear the skeptics pushing back. They are thinking, okay, so I'm just supposed to ignore my boss. I'm supposed to just casually stroll while everyone else is sprinting. I'm going to lose my job.
And that is the absolute biggest danger in misinterpreting this scroll. Musashi is not for a single second advocating for passivity. He is advocating for what he calls the quiescent sword.
Quiescent, that is a very heavy, deliberate word.
It means a profound state of stillness that is incredibly pregnant with potential. It is not a sword that has been put away to sleep. It is a state of being so completely ready, so perfectly positioned, that you simply do not need to move until the exact correct millisecond presents itself. He refers to this as maintaining a normal mind.
A normal mind.
Yes. It means that your internal mental state in the absolute heat of a chaotic situation should be exactly the same as your mental state when you are calmly sitting and sipping a warm beverage. You are not overly excited. You are not terrified. You are just completely present.
So you aren't stripping your gears, constantly shifting back and forth from totally relaxed to totally panicked.
Yeah.
You just stay locked in one highly capable gear.
Exactly. And to directly address the skeptic who thinks this sounds slow or lazy, we need to establish some guardrails. These are absolutely critical for applying this correctly.
Let's lay out those guardrails. What is guardrail number 1?
Guardrail 1 is understanding that rhythm is not slow. We have to completely decouple the concept of rhythm from the idea of sluggishness. Think of a cheetah running at top speed. That animal possesses a rhythm. It is a blisteringly fast rhythm, but it is still a rhythm. If the cheetah loses that specific cadence, it tumbles and crashes.
So it's about control.
You can work fast, you can type fast, you can speak fast. The key is that you are not rushing. You are placing every single word or action deliberately.
So it is ultimately about maintaining precision while at speed rather than sacrificing your precision just to generate speed.
Perfectly stated. Guardrail 2 is recognizing that calm is not passive. This is where Musashi uses a highly unusual but brilliant phrase. He tells the strategist to hold down the pillow.
Holding down the pillow. That almost sounds like you're smothering something.
It is a direct metaphor for absolute suppression. Imagine you are pressing a heavy pillow down over something volatile so it simply cannot rise up.
Okay, I can picture that.
He says this is exactly how you treat any chaotic situation. You are so intensely alert, so perfectly tuned in to the background rhythm, that the very fraction of a second you see the chaos begin to rise, you calmly suppress it. You check it before it forms. It is an incredibly active, dominant form of being calm.
So it is definitely not just leaning back and passively waiting to see what the chaos does. It is actively dominating the space with your steady presence so that the chaos literally cannot surprise you.
We refer to this dynamic as integrated deterrence. A genuinely calm person is vastly more intimidating than a frantic one.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about being in a tense meeting. If someone is visibly upset, shouting and waving their hands, they look completely out of control. But if someone else is sitting perfectly still, maintaining eye contact, and just calmly watching,
Yeah.
that still person is the one who holds all the actual power in that room.
Yeah, that is definitely the person I am worried about in a negotiation.
Exactly. And that leads to guardrail 3. Maintaining a steady pace does not mean indecision. It is the conscious refusal to act until the timing is correct.
Right, waiting for the opening.
Speed chasers act prematurely just because they feel physically uncomfortable doing nothing. They shoot blindly from the hip. The true strategist waits patiently until the target is perfectly aligned and then executes cleanly just once.
So, to synthesize all of this, speed is a valid tool, but it is a dangerous tool that must be strictly governed by rhythm. Uncontrolled speed is a fatal flaw. Rhythmic speed is the definition of mastery.
That is the perfect synthesis.
I want to really ground this theory now. We have discussed the high-level philosophy. We've talked about sword-fighting metaphors. Let's translate this directly into our daily lives. I want to apply the lessons of the Wind Scroll to three highly specific modern areas: work, relationships, and our personal habits. Let's start with work.
Okay, let's look at the classic project crisis. You have a massive deadline approaching, your colleagues are panicking, and the client is getting frustrated.
The standard speed reaction, the indoor technique, is to just aggressively multitask. You open a dozen tabs, you are on a voice call while simultaneously drafting an unrelated email, you skip your meals, and you are just vibrating with nervous energy.
And historically, in that specific frantic state, you are practically guaranteed to make a critical error. You send sensitive data to the wrong client. You overlook a massive flaw in the presentation.
Yes, and you completely exhaust yourself in the process.
The Musashi fix for this exact scenario is clear. First, slow your mind down. Maintain a steady physical pace, and simply execute the very next necessary step cleanly. You have to clearly identify your non-negotiable fundamentals.
That concept sounds like we are circling back to the principles of the Earth Scroll.
We absolutely are. Everything connects. You have to stop and ask, what are the few things that actually matter right this second? Not the dozens of things generating background noise, just the core tasks. And you execute those few tasks with a steady, unbreakable drumbeat rhythm. You do not sprint, you march.
It's like focusing on placing each individual brick perfectly, rather than worrying about the whole wall.
Exactly. If you focus on laying each individual brick with perfect alignment, you'll actually build a solid wall much faster than the person who is frantically throwing bricks into a loose pile, only to watch them collapse and have to start completely over.
Let's move to example 2, relationships. This is a big one. Specifically, how do we handle a highly tense conversation or a brewing argument?
This scenario is where the concept of holding down the pillow and reading the background timing becomes absolutely essential. Imagine a disagreement is escalating. The other person is raising their voice, they are speaking very rapidly, they are throwing out broad accusations. They have essentially become the wind.
And the immediate human instinct is to match that energy. If they get loud, I naturally want to get louder. If they start talking fast, I feel the need to talk faster to defend myself.
That is the ultimate style trap. You have allowed yourself to be entirely seduced by their chaotic rhythm. You are now fighting their fight on their terms.
So what is the alternative?
The Musashi fix is to become the ocean. You consciously keep your vocal tone perfectly steady. You insert a deliberate pause before you offer any reply. You completely refuse to be rushed by their emotional weather.
You essentially wait for their collapse.
Yes, the collapse. In any intense emotional outburst, there's a hard physiological limit. A human being can only yell at maximum volume for so long before their biology forces them to take a deep breath, before their initial surge of adrenaline begins to dip.
Right.
You are waiting for that initial wave to crash. When they momentarily run out of steam, that exact moment is the collapse, and that is precisely when you choose to speak.
I have to admit that is incredibly hard to execute in the moment. It requires an immense amount of personal discipline to just stand there and let that emotional wave wash over you without instantly reacting.
It requires tremendous discipline, but consider the alternative. If you try to speak while their anger is peaking, your words are completely useless. It is just your noise clashing against their noise.
Nobody's listening anyway.
Exactly. But if you hold your ground and wait for their collapse, your words land with massive authority. You have completely controlled the timing of the encounter.
Okay, let's look at example 3, our personal habits. This seems to be where so many of us struggle. We get inspired to start something new, like getting fit or learning a complex skill.
And we immediately apply the flawed logic of speed. We tell ourselves, I'm going to engage in a massive, grueling session every single day, starting at the start of a fresh calendar.
Right.
That is a pure sprint. That is loudly flapping the fan.
And usually, fairly soon after starting, we were totally exhausted, sore, and we just quit entirely.
Because raw intensity is not the same thing as a sustainable rhythm. The Musashi fix here is profound. Choose a repeatable rhythm rather than relying on massive bursts of effort. Choose calm repetition over sheer intensity.
Calm repetition. I like that phrasing.
It is infinitely more effective to do a brief daily session of study, a gentle rhythm you can easily sustain for years, than to force yourself through a massive block of effort on the weekend and then never look at the material again.
Yeah.
Musashi would argue that the practitioner who cleanly executes a basic movement 100 times a day with perfect form is forging a resilient spirit that the erratic weekend warrior simply cannot comprehend.
It really comes down to the compound interest of our habits.
Yeah.
A steady rhythm steadily compounds. Frantic speed just leads to early burnout.
Exactly.
Okay, I really want to give you, the listener, a concrete tool you can physically use because just discussing deadlines and stressful arguments can literally raise your cortisol levels. We actually have a specific protocol designed for this.
We call it the rhythm anchor reset. It is a highly practical method to essentially hack your own nervous system and forcibly snap yourself out of that panic speed state and bring you back into calm timing. It uses the exact biology we've been discussing.
Please walk us through the exact steps. How do we do this?
First step, simply pause your movement and actively soften your body. You have to physically stop the tension. When we are rushing, we unconsciously hike our shoulders right up toward our ears. Consciously drop them down.
Okay, letting the shoulders drop.
Next step. Exhale very slowly and deliberately, relax your jaw muscles. This is vastly more important than just generally trying to relax.
Why the jaw specifically?
Your jaw is intricately connected to the vagus nerve. When you physically unclench your jaw, you send a highly specific, direct biological signal straight to your brainstem that communicates, we are safe, we are not currently being hunted by a predator.
That is fascinating.
You literally cannot remain in a state of deep physiological panic while simultaneously keeping your jaw completely slack. It is a biological override switch.
That is such a brilliant immediate hack. You physically release the jaw to mentally release the mind.
Exactly. Third step. Name your immediate objective in one simple sentence. You have to clarify the specific target. Stop letting your mind swirl around the massive, vague cloud of everything you eventually have to do.
Just to find the very next action.
Right. Tell yourself, I am drafting this specific document, or I am cleaning this specific room. Just name the single action.
Cut out the noise.
Fourth step. Choose one anchor pace that you know you can maintain calmly. This is arguably the most critical part of the reset. Do not select your frantic catch-up pace.
Right.
Choose a pace that is completely sustainable. The steady pace you could hypothetically hold for a full shift without burning out.
It might mentally feel a bit slower initially, but it physically feels much stronger and more grounded.
Fifth step. Define one remarkably simple sequence. Start the task, continue the task, finish the task. Do not obsess over the final outcome or the reception of the work yet. Just commit to the basic physical sequence of forward movement.
Keep it purely mechanical.
Sixth step. Identify and remove exactly one rushed behavior from your immediate future. Just pick one small thing.
Like what?
For example, decide you will not look at your screen while you are walking down the hall. Or decide you will not rapidly consume your lunch while typing with one hand. Just force yourself to do one single activity at a time.
I'm definitely 100% guilty of the eating while typing maneuver. It feels like multitasking, but it's really just the ultimate false productivity.
It truly is. And the final step, commit to one proof action right now. Just pick one mundane thing and execute it with absolutely perfect rhythm.
A proof action.
Yes. Organize your desk with perfect rhythm. Draft a basic update with perfect rhythm. You have to physically prove to your own nervous system that you are fully capable of operating in this calm state.
I love that because it makes the whole philosophy totally manageable. You don't have to transform into an enlightened master overnight. You just have to fold a shirt like one.
Precisely. You build your baseline capacity for rhythm during the small, low-stakes moments so that that deep rhythm is automatically there for you when the high-stakes moments inevitably arrive.
Here is where this exploration gets really interesting. Let's examine the common mistakes. Because even when we understand this logically and we earnestly try to implement it, we still mess it up. What are the primary traps people fall into when attempting to shift from speed to rhythm?
I see 5 major traps constantly. Mistake 1 is continuing to confuse being busy with being effective. We have hammered this point already, but I promise you, it is the absolute hardest mental habit to unlearn. We are deeply conditioned to measure our personal worth by our level of visible exhaustion.
And the fix for that is to rigorously measure your actual output, not your sheer activity level. Musashi simply does not care how heavily you perspired during the encounter. He only cares if your strategy was sound and you survived the duel.
Exactly. Mistake 2 is what we call style chasing, or falling victim to the silver bullet syndrome. This is the endless search for a brand new application, a complex new tracking system, or an expensive notebook to magically solve what is fundamentally a discipline problem.
It's the mindset of, well, if I just purchase this premium organizational system, I will suddenly become a highly focused person.
Which is a complete illusion. That is relying entirely on an indoor technique. The correct fix is to aggressively return to your outdoor fundamentals. No tool on earth can replace the necessity of your own internal rhythm. You still have to do the actual work.
What is mistake number 3?
Letting other people completely dictate your operational tempo. This happens when you walk into a chaotic environment or a stressful meeting, and you unconsciously allow their frantic energy to infect you and speed up your own actions. This is ultimately a severe failure of personal boundaries.
So the fix there is to firmly establish your own anchor pace before you ever cross the threshold into that room. You internally decide, I'm going to speak at this exact measured tempo. I'm going to breathe at this specific rate. And you hold on to that rhythm, regardless of how chaotic they become.
Perfectly stated. Mistake 4 is the lingering fear that being calm somehow means you are projecting weakness.
Oh, yeah.
We get anxious that if we aren't visibly rushing around and looking stressed, our peers will assume we don't care about the project or that we're just lazily checking out.
And the fix for that is totally reframing our definition of calm into that concept of integrated deterrence we discussed earlier. A genuinely calm, observant person isn't checking out of the situation. They're actually locking into it on a much deeper level.
They are paying closer attention than anyone else. And finally, mistake 5. Waiting around for the perfect conditions to appear. It's the trap of telling yourself, I will finally establish my calm rhythm once this current project is over, or I will start moving deliberately once my environment settles down.
But the harsh reality is the environment never actually settles down.
And never. The wind is always going to blow. Musashi is very explicit about this. He says you must learn to find your footing in the marsh or the swamp.
You can't wait for dry land.
Right. You must locate the specific rhythm that functionally fits the current messy reality, not the idealized, perfect world you wish you were inhabiting. If you are standing waist deep in a swamp, you obviously cannot move as if you are running on a paved track. But you can still move forward with a deliberate, calculated rhythm.
You have to adapt your internal rhythm to match the reality of the external terrain. That is a profound lesson.
It changes everything.
This has truly been a powerful discussion. I feel like I physically need to take a slow breath just to properly process all this material. Let's do a clear recap of the main takeaways before we look ahead to what's next.
Gladly. Let's review the core concepts from the wind scroll. First, train yourself to see what is genuinely effective. Do not allow yourself to be seduced by flashy styles or rigid traditions simply for their own sake. Next, understand that real applicable skill is found in a steady rhythm, not in frantic speed chasing. Third, always remember that pure speed is very often just panic wearing a disguise. Fourth, maintaining your rhythm is what allows you to notice subtle signals and carefully choose your moments, moments that rushing would cause you to remain completely blind to. Fifth, actively rushing inevitably creates careless errors, severely weakens your strategic judgment, and spreads unnecessary anxiety to everyone around you. Sixth, true timing means calmly reading the actual conditions of your environment and only then committing to an action cleanly and decisively. And finally, speed is only a useful tool when it is entirely controlled by a masterful rhythm.
So we have systematically built a massive foundation here. We explored earth, water, fire, and now the wind. We have learned how to be grounded, how to be adaptable, how to be decisive, and now how to be perfectly rhythmic. What could possibly be left?
We are now fully prepared for the final stage of the journey. The ultimate transition from mastering technique to achieving true transcendence.
Next time, we are entering the final chapter of the text, Episode 8.
The scroll of emptiness. Clear mind, no confusion. We are moving beyond rhythm into the absolute ultimate state of clarity. The void.
The void. I have to say, it sounds incredibly mysterious.
It is definitely the most difficult philosophical concept to fully grasp, but it is deeply rewarding. It describes a state where the conscious self essentially disappears, and there is absolutely nothing left but the pure, perfect action.
Before we sign off, I really want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over.
Think deeply about this concept of the void that we are approaching. Your rhythm is the necessary bridge that eventually allows you to execute complex actions entirely effortlessly. When your internal rhythm becomes truly perfect, you stop consciously trying to do the thing and you simply do the thing. That is exactly where this path is taking us.
Thanks for being here. If you want the full series, check the playlist, and please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Text 1. Wind scroll means rhythm over speed. Text 2. Speed is panic in disguise. Text 3. Rushing feels productive but weakens judgment. Text 4. Real skill is clean timing. Text 5. Calm is not passive. Text 6. Rhythm is steady pace and control. Text 7. Do not let style seduce you. Text 8. Pause and soften the body. Text 9, name the objective in one sentence. Text 10, choose one anchor paste today. Pass.